Okay, the first item.
Thank you. I'll read it into the record.
Good morning.
Good morning. For the record, Audrey Vance, City Attorney. We have two ordinances to review for consistency with the comprehensive plan. Actually, only one was needed, but we put two. This is what I call an abundance of caution issue. Let me read the title blocks into record. I'll read both title blocks. An amendment to the Bonita Springs, I'm sorry, there is a difference between the two of them. An amendment to the Bonita Springs Land Development Code, Chapter 4, Zoning, amending Section 4-735, Use Regulations Table for zoning mobile home districts to permit single families by right in certain neighborhoods zoned MH1 and MH2, prohibiting replacement of mobile homes in the interstate interchange area, providing for conflicts of law, severability, codification, Scrivener's errors, inclusion in code, and effective date. The ordinance has gone for first reading before the City Council and will be scheduled for second reading on June 18th. The ordinance changes, and it changed somewhat. Let me make sure I have the right draft. I do. If you recall, and I know Mr. Sims and Mr. Thinnis may recall this, we allowed by special exception single-family residential, and that's the word missing there, into mobile home districts. But they were required to go through a special exception. The concern was setbacks, concern was compatibility within the neighborhood. Since that time, staff feels that they have all been compatible and there's no reason to delay people the 3 to 6 months it may take to go through a special exception. So it will allow people by right to go through and have be permitted there. With that being said, there is an exception, and that is if an existing mobile home park is under either unified control or ownership, then they will have to go through plan development zoning. So if somebody's trying to take a whole park and change it to a single-family residence, they can't just do it by right via their F005A approval from the counties from the 70s. But if it's an individual wanting to build a single-family residential or modular home instead of a mobile home, it is permitted by right.
Any questions?
I have a question, Mr. Chairman. I've studied this very carefully, and I remember when we did the other several years ago. And my question is, I don't get the benefit to the city or of this because it could open a can of worms.
Yes, it can, but it can also be a wonderful economic benefit and regentrification of neighborhoods. I'll allow Jackie to answer any question. That's more planning than legal, but I'll let.
Well, the thing that comes to my mind first when we're talking about the desired results is, or I think what would be the desired results would be in areas where there are established mobile home facilities now, and they're over a certain age, and they're looking to upgrade to meet modern construction requirements, like a lot of them are. I think some of the parks are saying anything that was built before 1998 or something, it has to be removed within a certain amount of time. And I can understand we would have some provisions for the upgrade, but the thing that worries me is I can see where we could upgrade with a manufactured home on that site. But one example that comes to my mind is up in front of Corkscrew Woodlands. They did this, and only they built cement block homes on mobile home lots. And it's really not, I don't think, what we're interested in. So I'm kind of concerned as should we have some restriction when we say single-family homes, should we put a restriction in that says manufactured housing, because that's essentially what it's going to be, or should be.
In chapter 4, in chapter 4, if you look at the definition of dwelling unit types and single-family manufactured well, modular homes are allowed in single family. But the intent of doing this was to, number one, save applicants time and money, and also get better construction that's safer and more desirable, as Ms. Vance said, and economically viable for these neighborhoods. We've had a lot of inquiries from the Spring Creek neighborhood that's very interested in redeveloping their lots into single-family construction, and it's a benefit for the neighborhood, and the association actually is behind it 100%. So that is the purpose of staff bringing this forward. It's also, the county does it right now by right, allows single-family and mobile home districts. The only other mechanism to do it would be, a map rezone if the whole neighborhood wanted it. So it's just an option to get better and safer construction as well. For these
Okay,
neighborhoods.
the other, the addition onto that question then, that concerns me a little bit is, once we do it by right, we've given up any additional requirements or any additional sound barriers or landscaping or road access or anything like that. We've given up adding that. When we do a special exception, we can add improvement to the road access or various kinds of conditions that we can put on with a special exception, that when it's by right, you don't have that right anymore.
Well, they'd still have to meet other standards of the Land Development Code. I mean, there are minimum standards for landscaping in Chapter 3, for single family, of what you're supposed to have on a lot.
Okay.
They're going to be required to get a driveway permit, either from our office or Public Works, depending on what type of road that they have access off of. So the Land Development Code should address some of those items.
You don't have any concerns about that? Okay.
If it may make you feel a little bit more comfortable, when we first looked at doing this draft and discussion, originally, I had looked at pinpointing specific neighborhoods where it would be permitted by right and elsewhere by special exception. And at the end of the day, John Dolmer assured me that they had looked at each of the areas, and they did not think there was areas that were zoned MH1 and MH2, that if it was under either unified control, it had one thing to protect it, and that the other neighborhoods would be sufficient within the city of Bonita Springs.
And most parks might,
Yes, it's on now.
and then some parks might also have their own deed restrictions, which of course we don't enforce, but they would also have their own deed restrictions that they would have to comply with.
I have another question. Are there any thoughts about including some of the ones that are under, I guess, the park control? Well, not park, that's the wrong, trailer park control, or under cooperative control, about allowing them to do it too?
By right, they still could do it. I mean, people do convert mobile homes to, sorry, I'm looking at you, but that was one of the things you did in private practice, mobile homes to planned developments. We would want it to be a planned development. We would, there are many parks within the city of Bonita Springs that they received their approvals somewhat as a grandfather, and I'll use one that's defunct now, Jones Trailer Park. Jones Trailer Park was built in the 60s. They received, I guess, a special exception to build a park out there. It was maybe a 10-minute hearing. Nobody really in Fort Myers looked at that issue, looked at, probably, it wasn't very comprehensively looked at in the 60s. I think that's a fair statement. And we had it as a lovely blighted area for many years in Bonita Springs. We do require planned developments for that. We do not want that permitted by right, or staff is not recommending for that to be permitted by right at this point. They could either go back and get conventional zoning if they want, or they could go to planned development.
Yeah. So am I assuming then what we are approving are those lots that are owned by individuals that don't have any association or
There may or may not be an
cooperative control?
association. There may or may not be cooperative control. So someplace like Spring Creek subdivision, there's going to be cooperative control. But someplace like Rosemary park, I don't believe has a homeowners association.
But all of these people have to own their own land, is that
Correct.
correct? Okay.
I have a question. What does interstate interchange area, what is that?
Okay. That is a land use classification on the future land use map of the Bonita plan. So, and that really is just one scenario where staff had given someone some preliminary information on setbacks and impact fees to replace or actually put on a mobile home. And it turns out when it came through plan review, our plan reviewer found out that it had this interchange commercial land use classification, which does not allow single-family residential or mobile homes. So it's really a land use issue. And the city attorney thought it was appropriate to put a note in the in the land development code. So I have different reservations.
We have debates on this, but let me go through here. The city in 2002, when it created the comprehensive plan, made determination what is appropriate and not appropriate uses in the interchange. And we have certain neighborhoods, like on Oakland, I'll just name the street because it's a lot easier to do it that way, where you have mobile home ownership. It is separate ownership. And we do not allow single-family residences. We don't allow mobile homes in the interchange area, the interstate interchange area. That's the land use classification for that particular area. Of course, that's only the one quadrant in Bonita Springs. Jackie is correct. Staff has made two errors. One staff, when Lee County was operating as us, by allowing somebody to put a new one. Of course, that means other people thought they could put new ones. And, of course, they're the ones who caught it, and then that's the hardest thing because we did have to go to council. It is an identified, unique area, and we normally do not put in land use classification. We don't put comprehensive plan elements into our zoning. We do put sometimes, well, no, we don't.
We try not to do it.
We try not to do it. But it's a geographic area, no different than Big Hickory, Little Hickory. There's other geographic areas, and that's the way I describe the geographic area, because there's really no difference in the interchange if you go a half mile up or a half mile back. So the only way to really give that geographic definition is by using the comprehensive plan classification.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah, it's an attempt to fix
We're having
or
a debate.
to. It's an attempt where you have a land use classification that does not match the zoning designation of the parcel. So it's an extra tool for staff to check the land use map when a permit comes in, just to make sure, because the zoning does not match the land use classification.
So what is there stays there, but nothing can be changed? Is that-
Correct. And eventually what we're hoping is, again, regentrification in that particular area.
I had a question, just for my benefit, going back to the beginning. How do they determine how big of an area to designate as interstate?
Good question. I think I know. There's something called ISIS, and you're giving me a headache. but
ISIS?
they're- ISIS.
It's a
and
standard almost.
It is a standard. When you build an interchange of federal roads, they have certain dimensions, no different than we have. Different road segments have like urban corridors, rural corridors. They have different types of, sides, different amount of setback that you need. And so when you build an interchange, it's almost like a half mile each way, I believe. Or
So,
it could be 660 is the popular number based on the old chain system for surveyors.
so would we find that throughout the state of Florida at the interchange?
A lot of times it depends
Interstate
if it was
intersections?
designated as a rural or an urban when it was being designed, I think.
I
So-
think most communities have the same intent.
Right, probably everybody has some, if they have an interstate running through their area, they probably have something, but you're going to have, I'll give an example, in Hallandale, you probably have 3 or 4 interchanges running through, and you're going to find very narrow corridors. Now, that's something also, is some of those predate the Growth Management Act. So, without
Quite a
going
few.
into, without going into too much history, you have to look at when Eisenhower started and designated the roads, and then figure out, you know, when the community was and trying to do it at different areas. That's way beyond my skill set.
Yeah, well, I was just curious, and it is interesting.
It is interesting.
Well, I think one nice thing about, well, the intent of the future land use map in a comp plan is to establish what we see in the future. And that's, I think, why they call it future land use map. And that's really a living document. As times and philosophies change, you go in and you change what your intent is for that interchange, so.
And that's when you
pretty
have
much
map
what it
amendments,
is.
Yeah.
which you will be doing at your next meeting, a
Yeah.
map amendment.
I guess my thoughts too had to do with the federal, like the interstate system. If
Uh-huh.
they had something that superimposes their ideas about what an interstate intersection should be.
But there's going to be different design patterns, which is good for the engineers, because that way you always have different, they can always design something. It's not a cookie cutter everywhere the same way, but there are standards based on safety, I believe.
Well,
Safety and
the
comfort.
new entrance and exit ramps on the interstate,
They're huge.
yeah, they take a lot more space.
Yeah, and if you go, like, say, in Arlington, the space would be probably just inches. I know they are, you know, I mean, they're really tight and compact because you're working with a very limited space. So, and there's good pros and cons, there's environmental aspects, there's safety aspects, all the different things you have to think
Okay, I
about.
was just curious, but
Okay.
thank
Any
you.
other comments from the,
Did this,
Bob?
did your
Yes,
question
I have a
satisfy this
question,
letter?
page 4,
I
number 8 at the top,
haven't read this.
second line. It says single-family redevelopment. Should that be just single-family development? I'm just, I don't want to leave it restricted to redevelopment as opposed to just,
So if somebody has a vacant MH1, they still have the ability, we can change
Yeah.
that to, that's good.
I was just
I think we had a
curious.
yeah.
I'm not quite sure which way we want to go on it.
So the continuing on, it would be development too, the next, where it says any redevelopment?
Well, I think,
No, that would
I
say
think that would
redevelopment.
stay the
Okay.
same.
All right,
Because then it becomes a single-family development, because at that point, it's been redeveloped into a development.
Yeah.
okay, all right. Any other questions or comments?
That's
Any
fine.
comments from the public? Good morning.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, Carolyn,
Good morning.
gentlemen. I'm here today because I don't have any axe to grind. I don't have any interest. But I happened to be watching the city meeting the other day, and this matter came up. And as a former owner of a mobile home park for 15 years,
This letter.
I thought to
seen it now.
myself, hey, if I still owned this park, would I be thinking about this particular proposal? And it came to my mind that I would like to be included in this. And I thought of the people that I sold the park to, which is now a cooperative. I'm sure they would like to be part of this. And my idea is to come up here and suggest that they be included as well. There was a group of people at the last meeting, city meeting, all from one park, which is on the beach. And they must be holding separate ownerships without a cooperative, so that they are not under this restriction that is in the ordinance. And I think if they are included, there are other parks like Imperial Harbor, part of Imperial Bonita Estates, which would be allowed to do this. But there's a part of Imperial Bonita Estates which is under cooperative ownership. Why shouldn't they be included in this? You know, to make people go through a planned development is no joke. There's a lot of work in it, there's a lot of expense in it, and to my mind, as soon as I saw that, I thought, I've got to say something, because going through a PD is hell. And I would like to propose that this be rethought. I think the whole concept of allowing people to put a single family home on a mobile home lot is an excellent idea. It's long overdue. I think it will clean up some neighborhoods, but if some parks are going to be allowed to do it, why not others? Thank you.
Thank you. Audrey?
Sure, I'll be happy to respond, but I'm sure it's more in Jackie's province, but let me start and then have her fix it for me. And from a policy standpoint, if you allow that, you're going to create a lot of cookie-cutter neighborhoods. They might have a certain charm to them, just as Levittown-type neighborhoods have a charm, but we do have, most of them would not meet current development standards. So it's one thing if people in individual ownership, there's already been some houses by special exception, you're not going to ever get that land reassembled. But in places like cooperatives, you have that ability so that if it's going to convert to something else, let's make them meet our current code. Jackie?
And a lot of the parks, some of them have what they call, I think it's like called an 86 plan. And what that was is the county went ahead and had special approvals assigned to certain parks where they didn't meet the conventional MH1 or MH2 lot dimensions and property development standards. So they have a special zoning document that outlines their setbacks, which are generally a lot less restrictive and a lot closer than our conventional MH districts. So for those parks, you would want to go ahead and have those come before the zoning board and council to address lot standards and whatnot as a whole. So in those cases, those parks are appropriate for, probably a planned development process.
Well, Mr. West raised a question in my mind about here we would have an issue in the city that where one park, part of it would qualify here and part of it would not. That is a problem with me.
Yeah, because IBE, there is a section, and they're near Bonita Beach Road and Imperial. There's a section that everyone owns their own lots, and then there's another section where it is a co-op. So I do see your concern. But again, if they have private deed restrictions that would restrict single family anyway, that's out of the city's purview because we don't enforce deed restrictions.
There's nothing we can do to rectify that?
I don't know.
The other issue is the fact that when you have the cooperatives, when you have rental, like RV, well, that's more RVs than, yes, I'll skip that part.
Well, if I understand cooperatives, a cooperative is where everybody owns everything and you own a certain share.
Right, like a
You don't, it's
condominium.
not the type of thing where you have an individual lot.
Correct.
So how would you
Somebody would
handle?
have sufficient enough shares to turn it and convert it to a different type of use. And at that point, you're looking at an entire area that you'll be able to make a change, as opposed to individual lots where you're not going to get every member of the individual lots. You might be able to assemble 5 or 6, maybe more, but it takes it's a whole different type of practice, a whole different change.
That's what I said in the beginning. I thought we were opening a can of worms that we might not understand all the ramifications
Well,
of it.
and that's an issue too. I mean, you could decide to continue as status quo, which is require each one individually to go by special exception. The problem is the special exception costs about $3,000 when you figure out the cost of your fees, when you figure out the cost if you need to hire any consultants to show things. And that's assuming you don't need to also take it to your homeowners association, to make sure that they consent to everything. There will be also potentially variances because some of these lots are very small to make sure that they're able to fit in. It's interesting because there's neighborhoods where I've been in mobile home parks where the lots are like 65 feet, so they're 15 feet wider than the average lot that we allow homes on the beach. So, I mean, it's not a cookie cutter situation, which is why LPA and why City Council originally went with the special exception requirement, but staff was finding that the special exception requirement was really not necessary because it was not being injurious to be at the setbacks that were there. Nobody was building the super mega height homes in the area. And this does have a way of protecting for flood and everything else. But I think once you open up for cooperatives, you know, to put them back into that cookie cutter, is that really good planning? And I'll let you guys decide.
Mr. Chairman, we have rules about when you remodel more than 50% of the valuation of a property, it now triggers you to comply with new requirements. And so what if we had something here where if there was a certain percentage of the park was benefited by this, if it was a certain percentage, then all of it was automatically?
And we looked at that, Mr. Dolmer and I looked at doing something like that, and the problem is you might have some parks that are very large, some parks that are, you know, very small. So, I mean, is it really, would triggering it if it was 2 lots, you know, 50% of a 4-unit facility, would that really be fair to make them go through a redevelopment, or?
Plus, that doesn't take care of the problem with the cooperative.
Right.
Because my understanding on the cooperative is that everybody would have to agree, or whatever the bylaws say. Bob?
Well, as far as the cooperative is concerned, a lot depends on how their documents read. But when I look at, to try to put it in perspective, planned development, they actually create their own zoning district. So their zoning, their planned development may not be similar to the zoning code at all. I mean, they have the ability in the planned development to create their own zoning category, their own regulations. They can deviate. So in effect, they could probably benefit more in a planned development than trying to do a straight just change over.
On the cheap.
Especially with a co-op where all the property is owned by everyone. So a planned development is a benefit to them because they can create what they want. So in that respect, it'd be quite a benefit. In terms of us, even with going with a home, single family, into a mobile home park could be cumbersome because of setbacks, building separation, all of that. And I think the planned development could be a benefit. Might be a little expensive, but they'll probably get what they want without having the regulations be a hindrance to them.
Plus, usually in a co-op, they have the financial resources to do that. Is there any other public comment?
The co-op, I understand your point of view, but I don't think it'll work like that. Each resident in a co-op owns his own lot, and that's his home, and that's it as far as they're concerned. And the co-op really acts like a homeowners association. They deal with the business part of whatever has to be dealt with there. But the lots themselves are their own. There will be no change. It won't be a benefit to go for PD because there will be absolutely no change. The lots are there. They're owned by the individual people. They don't want to change it. If they do want to change it, they'd have to sell their lots to the co-op, and they're not going to do that.
But if it's an individual, the individual, regardless of ownership type, has the ability to go forward and build that single-family residence.
Not with this, because it's not
they do. Spring Creek's-
it's not under unified ownership. The whole park is subject to the co-op.
I think you're using some circular discussions here. I think the purpose of the language, and when we use unified control, it might not be the same meaning under the cooperative statute as it is under the zoning. In zoning, what we're looking at is, do you have ownership of that unit? If you have individual ownership of that unit, whether it's in a homeowners association, whether it's in a co-op, whether it's a single-family lot in Rosemary Park, you have the ability to come in as long as you can show and prove you have that individual ownership. You may have something comparable to a deed restriction in your cooperative that may prohibit you from doing this.
But
just
that's
like
up
in-
to the cooperative.
That's correct. And we're staying out of that issue. But if you were trying to redevelop the entire place into an entirely new unit, and we do have people who have done that, we want to be able to have a new plan development so that we're able to add what conditions are necessary. Understand that when we're talking mobile home districts, that's conventional zoning, and under conventional zoning, we cannot add any conditions. So when I have to hear council up here, or zoning board, it's not really you guys, but the zoning board or council, it's like, well, can't we make it so, we heard the complaints from the next door neighbor, can't we add a setback requirement? Can't we add some shrubs and stuff? It's like, no. That's conventional zoning. They are permitted by right. Once you allow it by right, it's permitted by right. So what we're trying to avoid here is having the entire area redeveloped with no controls. It may be perfect and able to be redeveloped with no controls, and that's something staff will look at when they review the plan. But this is only for the conventional. I mean, there's still other avenues available.
Are you saying that in a cooperative-owned park, if I own a lot there with a mobile home on it, and I decide I want to put a single-family house on that lot, I just go to the planning department here, zoning and so forth, and get an approval for that?
I am saying that when we do zoning, we do not look at type of ownership. We don't look who is the owner, and we don't look at type of ownership. So when somebody comes before us doing a zoning case, what we look at is what is the use of that particular land on that particular site? Is it okay or not okay based on either our permitted by right under our code provisions, or does it need any changes or alterations? It doesn't affect the ownership. You may have additional auxiliary ownership issues that you need to take to the co-op. That may be out there, and that's perfectly fine. Incidentally, the neighborhood was not on the beach. It's Spring Creek subdivision that's been going through a lot of the renaissance of the changes, redfish, pinfish, those roads. And people were coming in one by one, and it does allow for a change in neighborhood in that particular case, because it is coastal. I mean, it's not on the island, but it's out there. You have a high coastal area, you have a high flood area, so you're going to want to have probably more single-family residential type structures than mobile home structures. I try to be sensitive to the mobile home industry, but wind loads, it tends to be safer.
Did she answer your question?
And I think that the wording there, if that's what you say, I'd be surprised if I go to the planning department and find that's the case, because this wording doesn't appear to cater for that at all. I read this ordinance quite differently from the way it's written.
And I understand that, and Jackie and I will look at it to see if there's any ways we can tweak it to make sure there's no misunderstandings of interpretation.
Because I just fear that if I were to go to the planning department and say, look, I want to put a single family home on this lot, they'll be telling me, oh, you've got to have a 10,000 square foot lot.
And I think what we'll be looking at is, do you have ownership of the lot? When we pull the strap number, because we use strap numbers all the time, I don't even know, but when we look at the strap number, does the name John West come up? And if it says John West, and we can pull a deed and it ascertains you own that individual lot in which, the four corners in which you wish to place it. and you design it so that you meet setbacks, and you design it so you have your driveway connection, you design it so you have your minimum landscape requirements that are required for single-family residential, and your sodding or your, instead of
But-
sodding, the chain, xeriscaping, because we allow xeriscaping, you don't have to always sod it, then you will get your permits.
Yes, but then I have to bring it up to standard. It may be a non-conforming lot.
It depends on the lot size, so.
Exactly.
There are tons of non-conforming lots throughout the city of Bonita Springs. I mean,
Don't we have a non-conforming section of the code?
right, and we call that lots of record. So if you have a lot of record, you can build on that lot of record consistent with the setbacks and the requirements for it. We have non-conforming use provisions to address lots of records.
When
Well-
it's a lot of record, trigger my mind here, when it's a lot of record, then it would automatically conform to have this, no matter its size or shape or anything, it would automatically conform for mobile, or for,
Single-family residence, yes.
single-family residence on there?
Yes, and that was a major concern when we started this, when we started allowing it by special exception.
I
because-
didn't get that when I read this, so now you're bringing up something that clarifies it a little bit, so that any lot of record, even though it would not conform if you were starting from scratch, if it was already a mobile home zone, then it would qualify
That's
automatically.
correct. But we don't want redevelopment of entire lots of records, for an
Why?
entire area.
Why? I'm,
Because
you've
you
mentioned
create-
that before, and I'm trying to see what would be wrong with that.
You don't have modern planning, such as curved roads. You don't have really modern
Okay,
drainage.
but a good example that comes in my mind is Southern Pines. It's a manufactured
have
housing place,
65-foot
and they don't
lots.
have curved roads, they just got
Actually,
the
their roads are-
grid system, but yet it's a well-defined park
It's
site.
beautiful. It is absolutely, Southern Pines is very beautiful, and I think the roads are curved. But Southern Pines have 65-foot wide lots, where, for example, I live in a 1946 lot. My lot is 50-foot wide.
So what we're saying is, now that 50-foot lot is a lot of record.
Correct.
And so if you had a lot of record and it was 50 foot, it would automatically qualify for a single-family home here.
Correct. So in my case, mine did because I was RS1 or whatever zoning, when they put zoning in place, my lot was created in 46. The mobile home lots, if it has an MH1, they would have to, prior to us changing it to special exception, they would have to take their MH1 and get it converted to an RS lot or one of the residential conventional categories. And then they could be permitted by right to do it. We bypassed that step in, I believe, 2006, when we said, okay, we're going to allow you the ability to go by special exception. So it's a lot easier, there's less things you have to apply to, and it's an easier standard of review for approval. So we did that. Staff, as well as council, said, hey, we feel we don't even need to make these people go through this additional step. So, and that's very similar to when council gives authority for administrative approval. They've determined that you don't need to go through that extra step. So that's all that is here, is we're removing that. But we have a caveat in it that if it's an entire neighborhood, we want to see them go through redevelopment. As Mr. Thin has pointed out, there are situations where it is better for the applicant, but a lot of people are thrifty and might not want to hire the planner or go through the process, so they want to just do it in the cookie cutter manner, and that's a destiny for failure.
I need one more little clarification now. You're saying that if it's a lot of record, no matter how the ownership of that lot is, that doesn't make any difference at all. If it's a lot of record, then it qualifies for here. No matter how it's owned, whether it's owned in a cooperative or what.
Right, I mean, the person who pulls the permits is going to have to be the owner. And Jackie, do you disagree?
I mean, I don't really get involved on that.
We don't look at,
Ownership.
the purpose of zoning is police power. We're not looking at the type of ownership. There's lots of creative ownership, whether it's cooperative, condominium, conventional type ownership, different people's, homeowners associations. The only thing we were mandated to do in 1986 was is even before my time, to start requiring people to have mandatory homeowners associations or some kind of property association to take care of some problems so that the government wouldn't be stuck with it. That's as far as we go. We don't look at which type they prefer. If they want to go with a conventional homeowners association or property owners association as to a cooperative, that's perfectly fine. We just want to be able to identify if it's an individual lot owned by an individual, they can go forward with this process. But if it is the entire entity, we're going to want them to go through redevelopment.
Now, may I have a little clarification on that? What would trigger an entire entity? 100%, over 50%?
I would say 100%.
So if it was a small installation that had like 20 sites, if 10 sites wanted to do the upgrade, then it would trigger and disqualify them because it would be the equivalent of the whole thing.
No, we're saying you have to go through an extra step if you're
Okay.
bigger. And that's what we're saying.
Disqualify
If
them
you're-
under this program.
Right, if you're going to blow out the entire mobile home park, there's a mobile home park, you're going to get rid of it and build a new development. We don't want you to build little cookie cutters. We're going to want you to cluster. We're going to want you to put in different open space requirements, different roads. But we will give you additional setbacks so that buildings can be closer together. So you're not having spread out and a waste of resources.
But again, getting to Rex's point, if there was a 20-lot trailer park, mobile home park, and over a period of time, 10 of them wanted to convert it, that would not trigger.
Not the way I'm reading it. Says any redevelopment of an existing mobile home park, that would be the full mobile home park. Now,
It's the way I read it.
yeah,
So the issues that Mr. West has raised here, you feel this does not make them worse?
if it's a cooperative, and the cooperative is, as Mr. West explains, something of a management company that takes care of it, but each person owns their individual lot, then that individual lot owner who can show that they have a lot of record, they're able to show that a deed shows that they own this area of land, they will be able to apply as long as the cooperative allows it. In some neighborhoods, it's not going to be allowed.
But as long as it's a lot of record, then it qualifies here?
Yes.
Okay. I think that settles it.
Well, the only thing that it's not entirely clear in the wording of this ordinance. I understand from Audrey what she's saying, but I just picture somebody going unsuspecting to the planning department and finds it different, and and is told, look, your lot is only 5,000 square foot, and the regulation says you need a 10,000 square foot lot.
If the lot is big enough that you are able to place a mobile home, you'll be able to place,
That's what you say.
right, that's what I'm saying. If the lot is not big enough to place a mobile home, say it's a remnant lot, say it's a lot inside a mobile home park that never should have gone into ownership because it was just the drainage easement.
No. That's
Because there are some of those out
Now,
there.
hold a sec. We're not talking about Jones Mobile
Yeah.
Home Park.
No, it's not
you
just
know,
at Jones, it's at other places.
the-
People, I can't tell you how many people have purchased a lot, not realizing it was really a drainage easement, and they
Well,
thought,
we're not talking about that, Audrey. You know.
okay, then that's perfectly fine, as long as we're not talking remnants and small little,
But it's clear that here, that if it's a lot of record, it qualifies.
Yes.
I mean, we've said that over and over and over today, but it clearly illustrates that here in the
now, you're not gonna build a super big house on some of these lots.
No, I'm just getting back to, if it's a lot of record, then it qualifies.
Correct.
Okay.
And could I ask, I've never heard the term lot of record before. So, from the way you explained it, I get the idea that those are sort of non-standard property
Correct.
designations. They may be smaller than usual or an unusual shape or something like that.
Correct.
That you have already approved.
Correct. And in fact, Jay is coming up here right now, Jay Sweet, and he can give you what I call the history of surveying. But in different times, in different years, different parts of the boom-bust cycle as Florida developed, okay? It's true. I mean, that's the best way to explain it. We had, people would buy different size lots. The lot, for example, where I lived on was a freebie lot. I paid for it. But if you bought across the street, you were given one free lot across the street of like size. So all different types of, yeah, there's some interesting history. There's some great ways of people doing subdividing. Of course, they all went into separate ownerships. You're never going to get those people to rebuy everybody's ownership and stuff, and you can't force them. So the question is, how do we get it so that it develops in a proper and clean and nice manner? And so I'm explaining a lot of record. So what we do is we have a fiction, it's in the comprehensive plan, and it allows for vested rights determination, or minimum use determination, and the term of art is called lot of record. So if it was lawful when created, it's treated as a lot of record. Now, we do have illegal lot splits, so not every lot out there is guaranteed to be a lot of record, but that's why we need to look at the deeds, we look at the history. And Jay, do you want to add to that, or am I making it too fun? You can have a seat, I mean.
Okay. Just for the record, Jay Sweet with Community Development. I'm city surveyor and one of the planners. The way this really works is, I think, rather simple. We have in the city parks that are co-ops, we have parks that are rental, and we have parks where people individually own the lots. If you individually own the lot, you would be able to come in and apply for and get a permit to build a single-family house. Mobile homes, I would say all the mobile homes were required, I think, by 87 or 83 to have a plan. And those plans were ratified by the county, so those lots are established. And they are effectively lots of record at that point in time. The sales for the lots, again, confirmed them to be a lot of record because they met the requirements of the zoning district they were in at the time that they were established. So those lots exist. What we're saying is that should we penalize somebody who wants to build a conventional house, a stronger house, potentially a safer house, because they're in a mobile home zoning? A couple of questions arise. One of the reasons that the language is in there the way that it is that you have co-ops. In a co-op, you don't own your lot. Generally, you own your percentage of the entire corporation and you lease your individual lot. That would be the same as the entire development would have to come in and ratify how they wanted to process the development. And so if you were in a co-op, it's a little bit different situation. They would have that opportunity, but that would be the entire development coming in with their plan.
I don't think that was the intent of what we were trying to draft, so.
Right. But then you also have rental parks. In the case of a rental park, they would have to come in for their entire development and do that. And the easiest way to control this is you control it by, I can't come in and get a building permit as an owner builder on Audrey's lot. She can, it's her lot. So if you don't own the lot, you're not going to be able to get a building permit to build on that lot. So you'd have to work out that situation with the co-op if you're a co-op. If, like most situations around here, where you own the lot, it's a great opportunity for you to come in and better your situation. Ironically, we have mobile home zoning within the city where you can come in and get a permit to build a conventional garage, but you can't have a conventional house. Okay, that doesn't make any sense. And so the idea is what makes the most amount of sense, and that is if you have a mobile home and you want to replace it, they wear out. 30 years, 40 years, whatever, they wear out, they need to be replaced. Do you want to replace it with a mobile home, or would you rather have a conventional built home that meets hurricane standards, that meets flood standards, that meets all the other criteria that you would normally consider? And what we had done in the past is made it a special exception. Well, that's expensive and time-consuming for the individual property owner, and it seemed to be an unfair burden. And we've had several people request this, and upon reflection, we said, you know what, there's a lot of areas within the community that would benefit by allowing people to come in and redevelop their lot with a conventionally built house. So that's the idea here. As far as the co-ops have their association requirements. Even parks that you own the lot oftentimes have association requirements. And we would treat that no differently than we would treat Worthington, Quail West, where when you bring your plan in, your association has said, yeah, we'll look at the plan and we agree that the plan's okay. It would be no different than any other community that we would treat it the way that would happen.
Let me ask you a question, Jay. So if you had a cooperative, and in that cooperative, you're allocated your individual lot, you would just show that when you went to the building department to change out your house, you would just show that the cooperative has given you permission to build.
Correct.
So the second sentence in the ordinance, and I don't know if you brought your copy.
I do not.
I'll just hand you mine. So the second sentence, as I read it, the intent, thank you, the intent there is only to allow that if somebody is going to have unified ownership of the entire area that is to be redeveloped, and it is the whole park, they are then required to go to planned development. They can't just do it as a mobile home conventional zoning by right and build 20 single-family residences.
Correct. I mean, for practical purposes, we can talk about, someone buying up 20 lots. If a developer wanted to come in and buy up, forgive me, I forget the name of the roads that are just south of Bonita Beach to the east of Imperial, there's a section down in there.
Big Bend?
Yeah, if somebody wanted to come in there and buy up, all this subdivision, you would say, hey, okay, let's do this. I don't think that's a problem, because if somebody was going there buying it all up, they probably would want to do that. So I don't see that as an issue. The real issue is always going to be the redevelopment of an existing rental park, or if the cooperative got together and decided they wanted to do something different. I don't foresee that, but I will say that during the boom that we went through back in 2002, 3, 4, you saw unusual things, and I saw many co-ops, not mobile home parks, but many co-ops were turned to condo because it was easier to get financing and so forth. And everybody in the co-op realized they could make more money, so they did that. So I could envision a possibility where a mobile home co-op would unilaterally have an election, they would want to do this because it would benefit them. I don't see an issue with that because it benefits the community.
And they would have to come forward,
That would come forward with the PD,
couldn't be handled on an individual basis because it wouldn't be individual.
because it wouldn't be an individual.
That's a good explanation, thank you.
Okay.
Any more public comments? No, all my stuff's been answered. Okay. At this point, we want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion
Okay,
to find this ordinance consistent with the comp plan.
second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Thank you, and I'll read the title block of the second ordinance. You do not have it physically with you, right, the whole ordinance. It's on file at the city clerk, but I'll explain that in a second. This is an ordinance adopting and enacting a new land development code for the city of Bonita Springs, Florida, providing for the repeal of certain ordinances not included therein, providing a penalty for the violation thereof, providing for the manner of amending such land development code, and providing when such land development code and this ordinance shall become effective. This is going before City Council for its first reading. What this ordinance does is it essentially adopts the Land Development Code as prepared by Muni Code. Muni Code is a company to be the city's official code. So it takes all the ordinances that we have done, the ordinances we inherited from the county, it melds them together, and now we'll have one, document until such time Now, you will not be getting the physical document. We'll probably have you using most, because they're very expensive. They'll be on the web, and you'll probably be able to do website research, and we'll teach you how to do that at a later date. But we will also have hard copies here, so if people do want to look at, some people like to read books better than, we have them here, and they are available for purchase, but very expensive.
I found that out. I inquired about that the other day.
Oh, you wanted to purchase one?
I was thinking about it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
yes.
they cost a couple $1,000s a book.
So, gave that idea up.
Yeah.
Also, I've looking on the website for the comprehensive land use plan, and I found that it's in a different format than it used to be, say 2 years ago.
I wasn't aware. I guess Jackie.
Well, it used to come with a picture of our seal on the front, and in a print out in bigger print. Now it prints out in very tiny print. It has all the little. It's the Muni code stuff. All the little.
Right, when they do formatting, there's some
Chapters and
little, I know like the number, and then you have to go down a little bit, and, it doesn't work for just cut and pasting.
I didn't bring my copy, but it just has a little titles, and you sort of check on one chapter, and then you get the titles of what, the pieces that are in that chapter, and the surprise was trying to print it out, where you need a magnifying glass to read it. So, had I known that, I would have used a bigger print, but.
I was going to say, I think they have it where you can adjust the print size.
You can on my computer, but I didn't know that when I started printing it.
Ouch.
Any comments on this item from the board? Any comments from the public? If not, would somebody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion, find it consistent with the comp plan.
Second.
Second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Thank you.
Okay. The next item is public comment, general public comment. Anybody have any general public comment?
I was just thinking, Mr. Chairman, about these mobile home lots. In 1980, one of my companies owned lots on J.C. Boulevard on the east side, about 6 of them, and they were laid off as mobile home park, or it wasn't a mobile home park, it was mobile home lots on the canal. And it seems to me they were an odd size, like 55 feet wide. And I replatted those as Pirates Cove replat number 2 or 3, I can't remember. And the way I did it, in order to build a 3-2 split house, which everybody wanted back in those days, you had to have 85 feet. And so I replatted those lots 85 feet wide, and I hired the local surveyor, and he took his original plat and redrew it in red ink with 85-foot lots, and I took it up to Lee County, and they stamped it received, and it was rezoned. And I look at those people, those lots now that people own that were originally laid out as, I wonder, down through the years, of course, they've all got houses built on them now, but that was how complicated it was in 1980.
Yeah.
Right, which is why we like a little bit more control, but we don't want to make it so excessive that
Yeah.
it's, impossible for people.
Go ahead, Deborah.
Hi, I'm Deb. I know you've already passed it, but the language in the first ordinance that was passed, it would be a kindness if you would just clarify it for the general public. Everyone in this room understood it, but I think it's a little bit too complex for someone trying to do that for themselves. So if the language could be clarified and the definition of the lot be clarified. And then I have a story, especially for Rex. I used to date a wonderful guy named Robert Tulls, and he used to send me to the county, where I would go into the county and find a little tiny index box, 3x5, and I would make copies, hand scribed, because no copy machine, no phone to take pictures. I had to take a legal tablet, and he bought all the unrecorded subdivisions. Now, all of you who bought land and flipped land, I understand how wonderful that was. It's all over Bonita.
Yeah.
It is. In fact, I keep a special book of unrecorded subdivisions.
Yes,
so
and
I
they,
have
and they
it
like to
handy.
keep it in writing, so we can't find it.
No,
You,
actually, it's now on the clerk's website. They do have an unrecorded subdivision page now. They just put it up about a month or two ago.
Any
Mr.
other
Chairman,
public-
as a side note, I just wanted to mention Bonita Fairways
yeah.
was originally all mobile home park.
Yeah.
And then it switched, we changed it over to a combination of multifamily, single-family, and mobile home. And then it turned out a lot of people in the mobile home section wanted homes. So we went back in and modified the plan, it's a planned development, to allow single-family in the mobile home section. Pardon?
There's the
manufactured.
definition between mobile home and manufactured home.
Some of them are concrete,
Yeah.
cement block, yeah,
Yeah.
the newer ones. Yeah.
Talk of weird history, I want to say 1990 or 89, I was involved in a zoning case of rezoning of Spanish Wells because it was all duplex.
Yeah.
And they
Yeah.
wanted to go to single family from the duplex.
Any other public comment? Our next meeting is scheduled for July 10th,
Oh, I will not be there.
and we discussed that a little bit earlier. Carolyn, if you have to leave early, that's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Is it possible to change this meeting to July 17th?
I'll be gone.
Or you'll still be gone? I'll be out of town July 10th.
What have we got to do next month?
There's a possibility that the Estero Bay Marina, which is the Weeks Fish Camp, might be sufficient to go to hearings so we can transmit the document to DEO for a map and text amendment. So that is a high probability that it would be ready.
So Audrey, if you're not here on the 10th, who would fill in? Does somebody fill in? Do you prefer to change it?
It's preparing transactional documents in addition to filling in.
So we're
I can
gonna-
have someone sit in the seat, that's
So
not a
we're going to
problem.
wing it?
Yeah.
Up to you. I would prefer,
I prefer that she be here for this.
move it to July 17th.
It's okay with me.
Okay with me.
I request an absence then.
Okay.
And will we, Mr. Vincent and Mr. Forbes will
Yeah,
hopefully
we'll
be
have to
here?
contact
So
them.
it's changed, so the next meeting will be July 17th.
Thank you.
Okay, no chance of
Okay.
making that one at all.
Could I have a motion for approval of the minutes for the May 15th meeting, please?
I didn't see any errors, so I move that we approve the minutes.
A second?
I'll second.
All those in favor? Oh, wait a minute, Jackie. No. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed?
No.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes, Jackie.
I want to introduce one of our staff members. He's new, Mike Fegan. He's one of our planners, so I just wanted to introduce you
What
guys.
was his name?
Mike Fegan. So,
Hey, Mike.
he's a great asset.
So he's one of the ones who would actually, when somebody came in with their permits and the building department had a question,
Yeah.
he would be the one who'd answer the question.
Good.
He greets
Good,
our
I've got a
public
question
all the
for
time. So he's fantastic.
Okay.
I have a question too.
Go ahead.
Well, I don't know, this could be off the record too. I was just curious, are the people in the city working on new well field ordinances? And are they going to come across the LPA?
Yes, one, it has to go to the
Purview.
LPA. But at this point, we're waiting for Bonita Springs Utilities has hired Johnson Engineering, because they have professional geologists, to review and take a look at the changes that are necessary. At that point, we'll make the modifications. What we did is we took the old county's well field ordinance as our own until we adopt something. We were working on it in 2005 through 2007. We weren't able to come to a final ordinance at that point. And, you know, at this point, Bonita Springs Utilities is taking a look because they are the ones with the vested interest in the well field to make sure the well field is protected. Once I get the comments from Johnson Engineering of what things to put in the ordinance, then we can start working with that route. It'll go not just to you, but also to the Water Strategy Task Force.
That was my second question is, and how is that going to work, will that go to them first for their input, or will it come to us first? And would it be,
Normally-
it wouldn't be approved by
Yeah.
us before it would be approved by the Water Strategy Task
Normal,
Force,
I would
would it?
imagine it would go to them first. Water Strategy Task Force, of course, is pinpointing on the water. Your issue is, the
On plan.
comprehensive plan. Of course, we have very little language in the comprehensive plan. We do have.
But there is
we do
some.
have- Yes, in fact, we just did the adoption of some. We would bring it to you normally to coincide with the hearing dates. So you don't, we normally, unless you are tasked with the job of actually, similar to what we did with homeless, working on an ordinance where we say, okay, help us formulate the ordinance. Normally, you're in a review capacity and you get it right when it's being scheduled to city council for hearings.
So do you kind of think that would be toward the end of the year, or?
I will not say anything, I'm not the project manager, I don't have the ability to control when Johnson is supposed to do it, when BSU is going to turn it into us. So in other words, I've pushed them a couple times asking questions, I know that they have hired them. I don't know if they've held what they call a kickoff, a starting, meetings, and so until I know more, I can contact Kim Hoskins and ask.
And I have one other question. The well field ordinances would be something that could be updated more than twice a year, right or wrong?
First of all, the restriction on comp plan is gone. We can always change our land development code provisions anytime you want. Now,
Okay.
I would recommend being careful about that because it makes the attorney feel perpetually pregnant. But you have to keep going in for ordinance change.
I understand that. I'm asking the question because of the close relationship between the Citizens Water Strategy Task Force and their potential findings versus what we would find on our committee.
Right.
So
Just-
we may find something and it get changed just because the process goes on, and then we want to make some suggestions or something, or vice versa.
Right. Well, I mean, your review capacity is a different capacity than what they're reviewing. Just because, for example, we've worked on the mobile, not the mobile home, that was today, the US 41 corridor area. We just did that. Remember, you saw it last May. Well, there were some changes that came up on the table or on the floor by council. I don't bring the lighting standards, another one. There were some changes. After you made changes, council made some additional changes, but I don't bring it back to you saying, now you need to see what council does. Because if we did that, we would be perpetually,
Okay, so we don't
In
look at it
flux.
a second time to make sure it complies.
no. I mean, again, if it's something that flied in the face of a specific comp plan policy, I would probably be telling council time out.
Okay,
Yeah.
just,
Any
curious.
other comments?
thank you.
We're adjourned.
Yeah,
Thank you.
appreciate that.